The stars are vast and indifferent, but the Imperium of Man is neither. To defy terror, to reject the Emperor's light, is to sign a death warrant written in blood and fire. Planets that dream of independence, that whisper of rebellion or falter in their tithes, soon learn the price of defiance. The fate that awaits them is not simply conquest, it is annihilation, reshaping, or erasure carried out with the cold certainty of a galaxy-spanning empire. To understand what happens to such worlds is to glimpse the machinery of imperial retribution. Brutal, merciless, and absolute. Before we descend into this tale of ruin and consequence, remember, this channel survives through your support. If you find yourself gripped by the dread and wonder of these stories, consider subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing this chronicle. In a universe where silence means death, your voice ensures we endure. It begins quietly, as it always does. A world under the banner of the Imperium is not born free, nor does it live free. From the moment a planet is brought into compliance, it is bound to terror in obligations that never end. Tithes of men, grain, ore, or technology, all demanded in rhythms as steady as the beat of a war drum. For centuries, perhaps millennia, a governor obeys. He sends his sons to die in faraway wars, sends his harvest to feed the armies of strangers, sends his wealth until nothing remains but the echo of obedience. And then one day, something breaks. Sometimes it is a famine, when the soil yields nothing and the people begin to starve, yet the tithe still demands its impossible share. Sometimes it is the pressure of corruption, when an ambitious governor listens to whispers that his world could thrive without imperial chains. Sometimes it is nothing more than exhaustion, the weariness of generations that have bled for terror without thanks, without recognition, without end. In the void between stars, rebellion begins not as a shout, but as a whisper, a council behind closed doors, a data slate that disappears from official record, a preacher who dares to suggest that the Emperor is too distant to be real, or that perhaps salvation lies elsewhere. In those hushed beginnings, the fate of millions is already sealed. The rulers of such planets know the risk. They know that the Imperium is vast, that its armies are endless, and that disobedience invites wrath beyond comprehension. Yet the human heart is stubborn. Pride is a poison and desperation a flame. A planetary governor might tell himself that terror has forgotten him, that the Imperium is too slow, too fractured, too far away to notice one world among a million. And in the silence before judgment falls, he dares to believe it. Rebellion does not always wear the same face. On some worlds, it comes dressed in banners and slogans, open defiance proclaimed in the city squares. On others, it festers in shadows, cults forming in secret, their chants echoing in forgotten catacombs. Sometimes the defiance is not even intentional. A tithe missed, a clerical error, a shipment delayed by storms or Xenos raids. Any of these can be misread as rebellion. In the Imperium of Man, where paranoia is as common as air, intent is irrelevant. Guilt is assumed. For the people who live upon such a world, the spark of defiance is often invisible. A farmer continues to till his soil. A miner continues to swing his pick. A child continues to dream of joining the guard. The politics of high spires and gilded halls mean nothing to them until the first rumors spread, until the Vox channels begin to grow silent, until the ecclesiarchy's sermons take on a sharper edge, speaking of loyalty and punishment with an intensity that makes the faithful tremble. Every rebellion, no matter how small, awakens a change in the air. Soldiers who once guarded borders now watch their own citizens. Administratum scribes whisper to one another as they count the missing shipments. The local Arbites walk the streets more heavily armed. A shadow falls across the planet. And though many do not yet understand it, their world has already begun to die. There is a kind of tragedy in these beginnings, because they are so human. A governor might not seek to destroy the Imperium. He might only wish to protect his starving people. A priest might not wish to betray the Emperor. He might only yearn for a version of faith that feels closer, more compassionate, less distant than the sermons from terror. Even the most treasonous acts often begin in the soil of desperation rather than hatred. But the Imperium does not distinguish. To defy is to sin, to falter is to rebel, to question is to invite annihilation. The spark of defiance once struck cannot be extinguished. It may burn slow, it may smolder for years, but the galaxy is patient, and the Imperium forgets nothing, and so a planet begins to turn. Secret meetings grow more frequent. The governor's palace doors close more often. Vox signals to terror become strangely delayed, filled with excuses or silence. And somewhere, In the labyrinthine records of the administratum, a notation is made. A world is behind in its tithes. A report is filed. A name is added to a list. No one on that planet knows it yet, but their fate has already been written. The first true sign of rebellion rarely comes with a declaration. It comes instead with hesitation. A shipment of promethium that should have departed orbit lies anchored in warehouses, its containers sealed but untouched. A regiment promised to the Astra Militarum is quietly delayed under the excuse of training, its weapons polished but never bloodied in war. Vox relays to the sector governor grow distorted, their messages filled with bureaucratic excuses about storms, riots, or technical failures. These delays, these excuses, are not merely accidents. They are the first tremors of treachery. Among the nobility, a subtle arrogance takes root. Court officials whisper that their world can stand alone, that the Imperium is nothing more than a distant shadow. They tell themselves that the void between stars is vast, that a single world can disappear into the darkness and be forgotten. Some even dare to dream of alliances with alien traders, or, though they would never say it aloud, of darker pacts whispered from the warp. Pride turns hesitation into defiance, and defiance into open conspiracy. But rebellion is never confined to the high spires. Down in the Hive stacks, among the endless warrens of humanity, the spark catches in another way. Workers labor until their bones ache, producing grain, ore, and weapons that vanish into the governor's coffers rather than into the emperor's tithes. Murmurs begin to spread. Why should we starve so that terror may feast? Why should our children die in wars we will never see? These questions, dangerous in any tongue, take on the weight of a movement when they pass from mouth to mouth, growing sharper with every retelling. The ecclesiarchy feels the shift before the soldiers do. Priests begin to preach more loudly, their sermons drenched in fury and warning. They speak of heresy in vague tones, of disloyalty hidden among the faithful, of eyes that watch from beyond. The shrines burn with incense, but the prayers carry unease instead of reverence. Faith, once a balm, becomes a chain of suspicion. Some cling tighter to the emperor, begging for his light to shield them. Others turn away, feeling only the silence of a god too far to hear. In this atmosphere of growing fracture, the spark of rebellion becomes inevitable. A governor, cornered by failing crops or dwindling mines, calls together his council and dares to suggest reducing the tithe. A group of nobles, emboldened by their own greed, withholds a shipment entirely, hoping the Imperium's eye will be turned elsewhere. Or, in the most dangerous of cases, an agitator begins to rise. Someone with words sharp enough to carve doubt into certainty. Someone who can turn whispers into chants. The Imperium notices sooner than most rebels ever believe. The Administratum's web of record-keeping is slow, maddeningly complex, but it is thorough. A delay here, a missing regiment there, and alarms begin to sound in distant halls of parchment and ink. Somewhere, in a fortress monastery, light years away, an inquisitor reads the name of a world she has never seen and marks it for scrutiny. Somewhere else, a commander of the Astra Militarum receives an order to prepare reserves just in case. The machinery of judgment stirs long before the rebels realize they have been seen. Yet in those first fragile moments, the world still clings to hope. The governor convinces himself that his excuses will buy time. The workers convince themselves that their labor will remain hidden. The agitator believes that the Imperium is too distracted, too consumed by greater wars, to notice one planet's faltering loyalty. It is a false hope, but it is hope nonetheless, and hope makes them bold. By now, the spark has become a flame. Soldiers begin to question their officers, or worse, begin to choose sides. The Arbites find themselves increasingly alone. Their patrols stretch thinner as unrest festers. Sabotage blooms in manufactorums, fires spreading where once there was industry. The governor's banners still fly proudly above the spires, but beneath them the foundation has begun to crack. No one knows precisely when rebellion crosses the point of no return. For some worlds, it is the moment the tithe ships depart empty. For others, it is when the first Arbite lies dead in the street, struck down by those he once policed. But always, there comes a moment when the spark cannot be smothered. From then onward, the fate of the planet is sealed, and still, in those early days, the people deceive themselves. They believe they are hidden. They believe their actions are too small to matter. They believe the Imperium, stretched across the stars, will not notice. But the Imperium always notices. It is slow, it is ponderous, but it is inexorable. And once its gaze has settled upon a rebellious world, there is no turning back. The boiling point of rebellion is never graceful. It does not arrive in careful speeches or measured decrees, but in chaos. The spark that smolders in back rooms and whispers eventually finds its way to the open streets, where it bursts into flame with sudden, terrible violence. It might begin with a single riot, sparked by hunger in a hive's lower levels. A shipment of ration blocks is withheld to meet the governor's secret hoarding, and the starving crowds descend upon the depot like a tide. Arbites arrive, their carapace armor gleaming beneath flickering lumen strips, shock mauls crackling with power. They expect compliance. Instead, they are met with stones, with blades, with the raw desperation of a populace who has already decided they have nothing left to lose. Blood on the streets is a signal, louder than any Vox broadcast. It tells the common man that defiance is possible. It tells the agitator that his words have taken root. It tells the governor that his control is slipping, no matter how tall his spires rise above the city. And most dangerously of all, it tells the Imperium that rebellion has reached its first, irreversible threshold. Once the crowd tastes its own power, suppression becomes harder. Weapons long hidden in caches emerge into trembling hands. Manufacturing workers, armed with tools and mining explosives, storm their overseers and claim control of their districts. The Vox channels fill with shouted messages of resistance, only to fall silent again as Arbite patrols cut power grids and destroy transmitters. Fear no longer keeps the masses docile. Instead, fear drives them to rage. The governor, in his palace of marble and steel, scrambles to regain control. He convenes his council, demanding order, demanding silence, demanding obedience. Yet his words are drowned out by the thunder outside, advisors argue. Some begging him to crush the rebellion with overwhelming force, others urging him to negotiate before the Imperium's gaze falls fully upon them. But the truth is already beyond their grasp. The people no longer see him as a ruler. They see him as a tyrant, a servant of terror who has bled them dry for centuries. And in the shadows, other voices rise. Cults of chaos, long dormant, seize the moment to whisper their truths. They tell the starving that freedom lies not in terror's chains, but in the gifts of the warp. They tell the soldiers that their strength could serve gods who actually answer prayers. They tell the broken and the desperate that there is purpose in rebellion, that suffering has meaning if it is crowned with vengeance. Not every rebel listens, but enough do. Enough always do. By the time the Arbites declare martial law, the planet has fractured. Hive towers burn, transports are hijacked, administratum offices are stormed, their scribes butchered as symbols of imperial greed. The Adeptus Mechanicus, ever calculating, withdraws its Skitarii forces to protect the sacred forges, caring little whether the governor lives or dies. The fragile unity of the planet collapses, and all that remains is the chaos of rebellion. Yet for all the fire and fury, it is still a doomed struggle. The people do not know it. But the moment their riots became revolts, reports sped across the stars. Somewhere a quill scratched their names into parchment. Somewhere an inquisitor placed a seal upon a dossier. Somewhere a fleet was ordered to muster. The Imperium had already noticed, and judgment was on its way. In the streets, the rebels shout their victory. They tear down Aquila statues and raise their own banners in the smoke. They believe for a moment that they are free, but freedom is an illusion in the Imperium of Man. Their spark has become a flame, and that flame has burned too brightly to be ignored. Soon the stars above will darken, and the hammer will fall. The planet, once hidden in obscurity, now stands naked beneath the Emperor's gaze. Its rebellion has been declared in blood, and the fate awaiting it is more terrible than any of its people can yet imagine. The Imperium does not act swiftly, but when it does act, it does so with a weight that is unbearable. To the rebellious world, days stretch into weeks, weeks into months, and still the skies remain empty. Hope festers among the defiant. Perhaps, they whisper, the Imperium has not noticed. Perhaps terror does not care. Perhaps the galaxy is too vast, too consumed by other wars, to spend its strength on one world among billions. These whispers are lies, but they are comforting lies. In truth, the gears of judgment have already begun to grind. Within the labyrinthine archives of the Administratum, scribes pore over tithe records, cross-referencing missed shipments and falsified reports. Each discrepancy is inked upon parchment, each parchment folded into larger files, each file carried by sweating functionaries into chambers where decisions are made. There, beneath the weight of incense smoke and the endless scratching of quills, a planet's fate is measured. Numbers become guilt, guilt becomes evidence. Evidence becomes sentence, and yet the administratum is only the first hand to touch the knife. Other eyes begin to turn toward the world. The Adeptus Arbites, ever vigilant, receive fragments of reports through scrambled Vox channels. They see mentions of riots, of Arbite casualties, of governors who speak in strange half-truths. Their judges sharpen their decrees and prepare dossiers of law and punishment. If called upon, they will descend with the fury of 10,000 gavel strikes, turning cities into execution grounds. But beyond bureaucrats and judges lies something darker. For the Inquisition, rebellion is never merely rebellion. It is a symptom, a wound that suggests infection. If a world dares to defy the Emperor, is it truly only hunger, greed, or pride? Or is it the touch of the warp, the hand of Xenos manipulation, the whisper of heretical creed? To the eyes of an Inquisitor, there is no such thing as simple disobedience. Every rebellion is suspect. Every rebel may already be a traitor to humanity itself. Thus, the weight of judgment grows heavy even before the first ship sets course. The rebel world is no longer anonymous, no longer forgotten. It is a name etched into records, a mark in the Emperor's ledger, a fire kindled upon the maps of strategos and Inquisitors alike. On the planet itself, the people do not see this machinery turning. They see only the silence of the stars. They mistake it for neglect, for forgetfulness, for the freedom they believe they have seized. But silence is never freedom. Silence is the drawing of breath before the shout, the raising of the hammer before the strike. Still, even among the Imperium's servants, there is hesitation. A governor who reports rebellion risks drawing attention to his own failures. A commander who commits his regiments without sanction risks censure. Even an Inquisitor, vast in authority, weighs whether the world's sin is worth their gaze when demons tear open the veil in other sectors, when heretics rise in numbers too great to count. But hesitation does not save the rebel planet. It only delays the inevitable, and with every delay, the fury that will fall upon them grows all the more absolute. Far across the void, ships begin to stir, engines rumble. Orders are signed with seals of blood and wax. Fleets that were once assigned to patrol, to escort, to reinforce are diverted. Their new purpose is simple, their mission undeniable: to remind a planet of what it means to defy the Imperium of Man. For the governor who once whispered of independence, the moment of reckoning has already passed. He does not yet know it, but his world has already been condemned. It will not matter what excuses he offers, what tithes he tries to send now, what loyalty he swears in desperation. The Imperium does not forgive, and it does not forget. Judgment is coming, and when it comes, it will fall with the weight of a god's wrath. The void between stars is mercilessly silent, yet it carries the tread of armies across its darkness. The rebellious world does not see them at first, for Imperial fleets rarely announce their coming. They gather in distant void docks, mustering silently, their prows marked with the twin-headed Aquila, battle barges of the Adeptus Astartes, black silhouettes of inquisitorial cruisers, endless squadrons of the Astra Militarum's troop carriers. All of them align their trajectories until the rebellious planet is no longer a distant name but a destination, fixed in iron resolve. For the citizens below, life continues with a fragile normalcy. Hives smolder from riots, manufactorums echo with unrest, but the stars above remain deceptively unchanged. Farmers still bend their backs to the soil. Children still chase each other through rubble-strewn streets. Some even dare to hope that the rebellion has succeeded, that their cries have vanished into the galaxy without consequence. The governor clings to that illusion most of all. He speaks to his council with hollow confidence, assuring them that the Imperium cannot possibly stretch itself thin enough to punish every faltering world. But though his words may calm the nervous, they cannot change the truth written in the void. The Imperium's silence is not mercy, it is calculation. From the first whispered report of disobedience, the world was catalogued. From the first riot, it was condemned. And now, as the fleets gather, the Imperium begins its true judgment, deciding not whether the planet shall be punished, but how. Some worlds are scourged from orbit, reduced to cinders so that their names become nothing more than ash on the wind. Others are bled slowly, armies of guardsmen grinding down resistance until only broken remnants remain to be shackled in penance. A few are delivered to the Inquisition, their fate swallowed in secrecy, their surface blacked out from all records. The form of punishment varies, but the outcome never does. defiance cannot survive. Back on the planet, signs begin to appear for those who know how to look. Astropaths, their minds tuned to the song of the Imperium, fall silent or scream in their sleep. Visions of steel and fire clawing through their skulls. Vox channels flicker with strange interruptions, echoes of signals bouncing from distant patrol craft drawing near. Traders who once ferried goods through orbit vanish, their ships seized or destroyed before they can carry word. The skies themselves seem heavier, as though the void is pressing closer, waiting to break. The governor, desperate, begins to send messages outward, promises of renewed loyalty, explanations of famine, of storms, of false accusations. Each communique is wrapped in the desperate language of submission, stamped with the sigil of his house and the seal of the planet. But these words are less than dust in the face of imperial bureaucracy. By the time they are received, judgment has already moved beyond listening. And yet, for a time, the fleet still lingers unseen. Days stretch into weeks, and rebellion grows louder, bolder, as if daring the stars to respond. Rebels shout in the streets that the Imperium has abandoned them, that they are free at last. Priests who remain loyal to Terra find their congregations thinning, their sermons mocked. The Arbits grow weary, their numbers dwindling as they are overwhelmed in skirmish after skirmish. The world, for a brief and tragic heartbeat, believes it stands upon the edge of independence. But in truth, it stands upon the edge of annihilation. The fleets are closer now. The Emperor's hammer hovers above, unseen, unspoken, inevitable. And when it falls, it will fall without hesitation, without mercy, without pause. For the Imperium does not deliver warnings. It delivers verdicts, and this world's verdict has already been signed. It begins with a shadow. The night skies over the rebellious planet are no longer the quiet canvas of stars the people have always known. Great void shapes move in the firmament, blotting constellations with silhouettes too vast to comprehend. At first, the people mistake them for storms or for the illusions of fear. But then the truth becomes undeniable. Starships, colossal and terrible, hang above the world. Their hulls glint with the imperial aquila, their vox grills chant liturgies of war, and their prows burn with the engines of judgment. The illusion of freedom collapses in an instant. The governor is the first to understand. In his marble palace, he watches as the planetary augurs flare with readings too immense to falsify. An entire fleet has entered orbit, its guns are lined, its escorts bristling with menace. Panic takes root in the council chambers. Advisors argue, some demanding immediate surrender, others urging the governor to fight to the last. Each voice trembles, for all of them know the truth. Whatever choice they make, the Imperium will not forgive. In the streets, the common people respond with confusion that swiftly turns to terror. Sirens howl from vox towers. The skies ignite with streaks of burning re-entry as smaller Imperial craft descend, their hulls howling with heat. Some citizens drop to their knees in prayer, begging the Emperor for mercy, as though faith might erase rebellion. Others grab weapons, rallying to defend their hive blocks, believing they can stand against the armies of a galaxy. Yet most simply stare upward, stunned into silence, their voices stolen by the enormity of the fleet above. The Arbites, bloodied but unbroken, received their orders directly from orbit, where once they were fractured and desperate. Now they are renewed with grim purpose. They march through streets with vox-amplified decrees, announcing martial law not in the governor's name, but in the name of the Imperium itself. Their batons fall heavier, their shotguns roar louder, their visors gleam with a new authority. To the rebels, it is a cruel irony. The very enforcers they thought beaten now march with the strength of an empire at their back. And yet the Imperium does not descend immediately in full. It is not their way. First comes fear. The fleet lingers in the heavens, a silent host of judgment. Orbital augurs scan every surface, tracking troop movements, cataloguing fortifications, noting every beacon of resistance. Vox channels are jammed, choked with endless canticles of loyalty. Entire cities find their power grids disrupted, their comms silent, their skies darkened by the vast shadows of ships overhead. It is not war, it is suffocation. For the governor, there is no refuge. He sends one last desperate message, his words spilling with contrition. He swears loyalty. He blames agitators, famine, the warp, anything that might absolve him of guilt. But the Imperium is not deceived. His words are filed away in the vox banks of orbiting cruisers, noted without mercy. He is already marked for death. The only question remaining is whether he shall die swiftly or slowly, whether his execution will be quiet or made into spectacle. On the planet's surface, hope dies more slowly. Some rebels still cry out that they can resist, that the Imperium cannot possibly crush them all. They do not yet understand the truth. The Imperium can crush them all, and it will. Others turn on one another, factions fracturing, accusations flying that this noble or that priest caused their doom. Violence spreads, not against Arbites this time, but against neighbors, against rivals, against the guilty and the innocent alike. Rebellion begins to consume itself, even before the first guardsman sets foot on soil, and above, the fleet waits. Patient, inevitable, merciless. The weight of imperial judgment is not in its swiftness, but in its certainty. The people look to the stars and see their fate written in steel and fire. Some pray, some weep, some still cling to denial, but none can escape the truth. The Emperor's hammer has arrived, and the world beneath it will never be the same again. The waiting ends with fire. The fleet that had hung above the planet like a silent omen suddenly roars to life. Orbital vox hymns reach a crescendo. Vast choirs of machine spirits and servitors chanting praises to the Emperor as targeting systems align. Then without warning, the first lance strikes. From the heavens, a spear of white gold energy tears through the sky. It does not strike a fortress or a barracks. It strikes a Hab district, a place swollen with rebels and civilians alike. In an instant, towers of plasteel crumble to molten ruin, and tens of thousands vanish in a flash of light. The shockwave ripples outward, leveling blocks, silencing every voice in its radius. It is not precision, it is declaration. The Imperium has spoken, and its words are made of fire. Other strikes follow. Plasma batteries sear Manufactoria into glass, reducing once proud engines of rebellion into craters of slag. Macro cannon shells the size of Hab units rain down, punching through hives and scattering rubble like dust. Each strike is chosen not to win a war, but to break spirit. Entire sectors are erased, and the survivors know they live only because the Imperium has allowed them to. For now, and then, when the planet is choking on ash and terror, the transports descend. Through the clouds, the dropships come. Great steel leviathans wreathed in flame, guided by the hymns of tech priests and the machine cant of their augurs. Each vessel screams with the fury of re-entry, their armored hulls turning night into day with burning contrails. They do not descend quietly. Their very arrival is a weapon, a storm of thunder and light meant to cow the masses into submission before the first ramp lowers. The first boots to touch soil are not those of the Astra Militarum. They are the Adeptus, Arbites, reinforced from orbit with heavier arms and armor. Their formations move with brutal efficiency, clearing landing zones, securing choke points, and executing resistance leaders in public squares. Their vox grills thunder with proclamations. By the will of the Emperor, this world is reclaimed. Resist, and you are already dead. But they are only the vanguard. Soon after, the guardsmen arrive. Endless ranks of humanity clad in flak armor and bearing lasguns pour forth from the transports. Regimental banners rise above the ash, displaying the names of worlds long forgotten, their colors sanctified with blood from campaigns stretching across the galaxy. To the civilians, it is overwhelming. An ocean of soldiers, a tide of order and discipline that dwarfs any notion of resistance. Each guardsman may be fragile, but together they are unbreakable. Chimeras roll from their holds, engines snarling, turrets swiveling as they herd refugees into makeshift pens. Basilisks are unloaded, their Earthshaker cannons already seeking targets beyond the horizon. Vox officers chant coordinates, commanders bark orders, and commissars stalk the ranks with bolt pistols drawn, ready to enforce loyalty with a single shot. And among them, rarer figures stride. Priests bellow hymns of wrath, their voices cracking as they raise chainswords and icons high, urging men to slay in the Emperor's name. Tech priests shuffle with mechadendrites twitching, their binharic chatter binding machine spirits to obedience. Astropaths, blind and hollow-eyed, whisper prayers to the warp, as though to steady the fragile lifeline that connects this world to terror itself. For the rebels, the sight is suffocating. The streets that once rang with their cries of freedom are now choked with imperial steel. Their banners are torn down and burned, replaced with the aquila. Their leaders are hunted like vermin, dragged into the open to face summary execution. And still, the dropships descend, wave after wave, until the very ground shakes with the weight of conquest. The hammer has fallen, but it has only just begun to strike. The first real battles erupt not in the open plains or barren wastelands, but in the choking veins of the hives themselves. The Imperium does not waste time with honor or ritual. They strike at the heart, cutting deep into the arteries of rebellion where millions live stacked upon millions, where every corridor can become a barricade and every shadow might conceal a rifle. The Arbites lead the charge through the upper hive spires, their mauls sparking against ferrocrete, their combat shields raised as lass bolts crackle in the gloom. They advance with grim precision, every step punctuated by the bark of shotguns and the crunch of boots over shattered glass. Each breach is answered with defiance. Rebels, clutching scavenged weapons and stolen lasguns, pour fire from balconies and shattered hab windows. Some hurl homemade explosives, their desperate sparks illuminating the black armored visors below. For a moment, the hive feels alive with defiance, the voices of thousands echoing with a final cry of freedom. But defiance does not last against the hammer. Grenades burst like thunder in the narrow halls, smoke and flame swallowing entire barricades. Heavy bolters roar, their shells ripping men apart in a spray of bone and shrapnel. Flamer units advance without hesitation, their nozzles sweeping arcs of liquid fire that cling to walls, bodies, and air alike. The screams of burning flesh drown out the last chance of resistance, turning alleys into funeral pyres. The Arbites do not flinch. They record each purge with cold precision, noting names, faces, and crimes where they can, but never slowing their march. And then come the Guard. The Astra Militarum roll into the mid-hives like a flood of iron and discipline. Columns of chimeras grind through shattered avenues, their multi-lacers spitting light into the rubble. Infantry squads fan out, pressing forward with the relentlessness of a tide, lass bolts flashing in disciplined volleys. Rebels attempt ambushes, springing from maintenance tunnels or collapsing stairwells upon advancing troops, but the Guard absorb losses with cold inevitability. For every squad cut down, 2 more arrive, their boots stamping the rhythm of the Imperium's will. Basilisks positioned outside the hive's fire blindly into the depths, their Earthshaker rounds collapsing levels whole. Streets vanish in clouds of pulverized stone, and entire hab blocks are reduced to dust. To the rebels, it feels like the world itself is turning against them. To the Guard, it is merely procedure. Yet resistance is not without fury. In the bowels of the hive, insurgents ignite Prometheum reserves, consuming whole corridors in roaring infernos. Snipers hide within ventilation shafts, picking off officers with surgical precision. Civilians, children, elders, the infirm, are dragged into the fighting by desperation, wielding knives, pipes, or nothing but their bare hands. For them, surrender is no longer an option. They know the Imperium's mercy is as fleeting as smoke. Commissars answer defiance with blood. Their pistols crack with merciless rhythm, cutting down not only rebels, but any guardsman who falters in his advance. Their voices carry over the roar of war, declaring that hesitation is treason, and that death in the Emperor's service is the only absolution. The guardsmen march on, fear crushed beneath duty, as much driven by the pistols at their backs as by loyalty in their hearts. Above, the skies never quiet. Valkyries shriek through smoke-choked canyons, disgorging squads of stormtroopers into plazas where resistance is thickest. Their hellguns hiss with deadly light, carving through rebels in disciplined bursts. Where they land, the battle shifts instantly, and those who survive flee deeper into the hive, dragging their wounded with them, seeking tunnels untouched by the hammer's blows. But tunnels offer no salvation. Already, squads of Skitari from the Mechanicus prowl the underhive, their augmetics gleaming, their eyes dead and red. Vox static heralds their advance, their galvanic rifles whispering death from the dark. For them, rebellion is not heresy, it is inefficiency, a malfunction to be corrected with bolt and blade. Street by street, level by level, the Hive falls. Every avenue is painted with blood, every spire echoes with screams, every level collapses under the sheer weight of Imperial advance. The hammer does not strike once, it strikes again and again, each blow more devastating than the last. And yet, in the deepest tunnels, whispers remain. Some rebels speak of salvation still to come, of allies hidden in shadow, of weapons yet unleashed. Others simply whisper prayers to gods they do not name. The Imperium crushes bodies, but hope, however foolish, still clings like smoke in the ruins. The gunfire begins to fade in certain districts, not because resistance has been crushed entirely, but because fear has finally become stronger than defiance. The rebels who once screamed war cries from the rooftops now huddle in the ruins, their weapons trembling in exhausted hands. For the Imperium, this is the moment when conquest transforms into domination. Steel alone does not cement rule, terror does. The Arbites understand this well. Once the streets are secured, they turn their attention to spectacle. In every plaza they seize, gallows rise with machine precision. Servitors hammer iron into stone, raising scaffolds as priests daub them with oils of sanctification. Within hours, entire squares are reshaped into theaters of punishment. The first victims are not soldiers, but symbols. The rebel governors, the agitators, the priests who turned their sermons against terror. Dragged into the open, beaten and bound, they are paraded before their own followers. Some scream loyalty to the rebellion until the rope tightens around their necks. Others weep and beg for mercy. It makes no difference. Their deaths are slow, deliberate, and public. The message is clear. Rebellion is not only futile, it is unforgivable. Commissars expand upon this theatre with equal cruelty. They do not hide executions behind walls or orders. They make examples, dragging captured rebels into the streets, lining them up against walls, and firing bolt rounds that scatter flesh across the stones. Sometimes, they turn their pistols upon their own guardsmen, executing anyone who hesitates, who falters, or whose last bolts miss their mark. Fear spreads deeper than any orbital lance. It is written into the hearts of all who see these acts, that the Imperium does not forgive weakness, whether in friend or foe, but terror is not limited to the rebels. Civilians feel its weight most heavily. Whole families are gathered in courtyards, forced to watch as neighbors are executed, as homes are burned in cleansing fire. Children cry as Arbites drag their parents away, their wails drowned out by the thunder of marching boots and the crackle of loudhailers. The Imperium does not differentiate between those who picked up arms and those who merely lived in the wrong district. Guilt is collective. Punishment is universal. Survival itself becomes the only loyalty left to them. Above the carnage, Imperial banners unfurl. The Aquila hangs from ruined balconies, its wings spread across rubble and ash. Priests march through the streets, their voices rising in hymns that compete with the sound of executions. "The Emperor protects," they cry, even as their flocks cower in fear rather than faith. Yet still, some kneel, still some pray. Even under the lash, the people cling to belief, desperate for any meaning in the firestorm. In the underhives, however, resistance simmers. Every hanging, every firing line, every burning home plants another seed of hatred. Some whisper that the Imperium has revealed itself as no better than the tyrants they claim to overthrow. Others pray not to the Emperor, but to darker powers, their words slipping into the warp like sparks into dry tinder. Rumors spread that cults rise in the shadows, that desperate men and women have begun to carve symbols into the walls. Symbols not of the Aquila, but of 8 pointed stars. The Arbites are not blind to these whispers. They redouble their patrols, executing entire hab blocks if even a trace of cultist scrawling is found. To them, this is efficiency. To the survivors, it is cruelty beyond measure. Yet cruelty, as always, is the Imperium's most reliable weapon. By now, the once defiant world has become a graveyard of its own hopes. Where laughter once echoed, only hymns and sobbing remain. Where freedom banners once flew, only nooses sway in the poisoned wind. And above it all, the hammer still hangs poised, its next blow ready to fall without hesitation. The Imperium has shown the people the cost of rebellion. But beneath the ashes, something dangerous stirs. The unquenchable spark of hatred. The memory of fire that refuses to die. The hammer may crush, but in its crushing, it sometimes forges something worse. The war has ended, but the silence it leaves behind is worse than the gunfire. In the days following the purges, the Hive cities resemble mausoleums. Smoke still coils upward from burned-out sectors, painting the skies in hues of grey and red. The air is thick with the stench of charred flesh and promethium, seeping into every corridor, every lung. Streets once choked with barricades now lie littered with corpses and rubble. The echoes of lasbolts and screams have faded, replaced only by the groaning of collapsed hab blocks and the low thrum of Imperial patrols that never cease. The rebellion is broken, its voice silenced, but the silence does not feel like peace. It feels like death. Survivors creep from hiding places like vermin, eyes hollow, hands shaking. They move cautiously, dragging themselves through rubble in search of food, water, or family that may still breathe beneath the ruins. Some are too numb to search. They sit where they were left, their faces blank, staring at nothing, as if their souls fled with the smoke rising into the heavens. Others kneel, whispering prayers to the Emperor with lips cracked from thirst, desperate to prove their loyalty after all they have witnessed. They do not know if prayer brings mercy, but they know silence brings suspicion, and suspicion is death. The Arbites waste no time in reshaping the wreckage into order. Curfews are declared by loudhailers that crackle from Vox towers. Checkpoints rise on every avenue, choke points where civilians are herded, questioned, and searched. Vox skulls circle overhead, recording every face. In the plazas, gallows remain standing, their ropes swaying gently in the poisoned wind. Each noose is a reminder that rebellion has not been punished fully. It is being punished still, every day, every hour. The Astra Militarum too remains, entrenched like an occupying tide. Regiments establish barracks in manufactoria, converting factories of rebellion into temples of discipline. Basilisks stand ready outside the cities, their barrels aimed inward now rather than outward. Refugees are rounded up into camps, where ration lines stretch endlessly and watchtowers loom above. Guardsmen keep their rifles trained not on alien foes, but on the people they are sworn to protect. Yet beneath this veneer of order, something festers. Rumors whisper through the camps and the underhives, moving like smoke through cracks. Some say the Emperor's gaze has turned away, that no true protector would allow such slaughter. Others whisper that the dead do not rest, that in the ruins, shadows walk, and voices murmur prayers not to terror, but to darker stars. Graffiti appears in hidden places, carved with shaking hands, 8-pointed stars, serpentine runes, and sigils too warped to name. The Arbites scour them away when they are found, but for every symbol destroyed, 2 more rise. Children orphaned in the purges huddle together, speaking in hushed tones of gods who answer more swiftly than the Emperor ever did. Wives who lost husbands, husbands who lost wives, turn their grief into fury. They whisper that the Imperium may have crushed the rebellion, but it has planted something far worse. A hatred that can never be extinguished, one that will outlive them, one that listens when the warp stirs. Even among the loyal, despair is thick. Priests drag survivors into cathedrals rebuilt from ruins, their voices hoarse as they preach submission, repentance, and eternal loyalty. Some weep as they kneel, desperate for absolution. Others kneel only to avoid the Arbites' gaze, their hearts empty of belief. Faith becomes survival, and survival becomes chains. Above it all, the fleet remains in orbit, a reminder that the Imperium's judgment is not fleeting. The stars themselves seem to burn with watchful eyes, promising more fire should even a whisper of resistance rise again. And yet, whispers already stir, carried in the dark, in the ashes, in the hearts of those who have lost everything. The Imperium believes the world is pacified, but ashes hide embers, and embers can smolder for centuries. In those embers lies not hope, but something far more dangerous. Night falls heavier than it once did. The city's glow, once born of industry and rebellion, is gone. Now only the dim orange of pyres and the piercing white of Arbit's searchlights carve the dark. In the silence between their sweeps, people whisper to one another, though never above a breath. The rebellion may have died, but its ghosts remain, and they stalk the survivors with every passing hour. The Arbites are relentless. They enforce curfews with unflinching brutality, dragging those caught in the streets after dusk into holding cells that few return from. Patrols move like shadows with steel boots, vox grills hissing proclamations of loyalty and punishment. To live in the city now is to exist under constant judgment. Every action weighed by faceless enforcers who see treason in hesitation. Entire families vanish overnight, their habs marked with the crimson sigils of seizure. Neighbors avert their eyes, not daring to ask questions, for to ask is to be guilty. Within the camps, hunger gnaws. Rations are meager, distributed with cruel precision, and always in short supply. The Arbeits and Guard eat first. The civilians eat last, if at all. Children cry themselves to sleep, their ribs sharp against their skin, while parents barter scraps of food for scraps of dignity. Disease spreads through overcrowded shelters, yet medici units treat only those deemed useful to imperial labor. The rest are left to rot, and still, priests march through the camps, demanding hymns and faith from throats cracked by thirst. The sermons cut deeper than the hunger. For some, they are a lifeline, the last fragile tether to meaning in a world reduced to ash. For others, they are salt poured into wounds, empty promises that the Emperor protects when his justice has already burned their homes, slain their families, and left them with nothing but chains. These hollowed souls gather in corners, their voices hushed, speaking of other gods, not the distant Emperor upon his golden throne, but gods who answer, who promise vengeance, who promise freedom, at a price, and the warp listens. Strange things begin to stir in the ruins. Symbols daubed in blood reappear where Arbeits had scoured them away. Larger now, bolder. Some survivors claim to hear whispers in the dark, voices calling their names, offering strength in exchange for surrender. Others swear they see figures in the smoke, shapes too tall, too twisted, their eyes burning like coals. The priests call these stories heresy, but the fear in their eyes betrays them. Even the faithful feel the presence of something watching. In the deepest underhive tunnels, forgotten chambers become gathering places. Broken men and women kneel before makeshift altars of bone and steel, their prayers no longer directed to terror. They call upon gods of blood, of change, of rot, of pleasure, names forbidden yet intoxicating. These gatherings are small, desperate, fragile, but each night they grow. Where once there was only despair, now there is purpose. Where once there were ashes, now there are sparks. Meanwhile, those who cling to loyalty suffer their own torment. They wake each morning to serve imperial overseers, breaking their bodies in manufactoria rebuilt from rubble, their sweat and blood demanded as tribute. They kneel in cathedrals rebuilt atop ruins, chanting hymns that scrape raw their throats. They do all that is asked, all that is demanded, yet their eyes betray the hollowness within. They live not because they believe, but because survival is the only faith left to them. The Imperium believes the rebellion ended when the last barricade fell. But in truth, the rebellion has only changed shape. It has moved from streets into shadows, from banners into whispers, from defiance into prayer, dark prayer. And so the world stands upon a knife's edge. The Arbeits march above, confident in their order, blind to the infections seeping beneath their boots. The Guard enforce silence, believing fear eternal, unaware that fear itself is a seed. And the survivors, broken and hollow, stand between damnation and oblivion. The ashes of hope remain, but ashes are the perfect ground for corruption to grow. The first signs are dismissed as coincidence. A patrol of Arbeits disappears in the lower hive, their vox feeds cutting to static mid-transmission. Command assumes they were ambushed by lingering rebels, their bodies stripped and hidden by those still too stubborn to surrender. But when a second patrol vanishes in the same sector, leaving behind only torn armor plates marked with strange runes, the whispers grow louder. At first, the Arbeits respond with ritual precision. Sweep teams march into the dark with flamers and cyber mastiffs, flooding tunnels with fire until nothing living can remain. They return with charred corpses, yet among them are bodies that do not match any human form. Twisted bones, elongated jaws, skin stretched into symbols as though carved by hands unseen. The corpses are burned immediately, priests chanting louder, Arbeits tightening curfews. But the images linger in the minds of those who saw them, haunting dreams with shadows that should not exist. In the camps, survivors begin to change. Hunger no longer bends their backs as it once did. Their eyes gleam with unnatural light, their voices carrying strange cadences when they chant hymns. Some are seen carving patterns into their flesh, whispering promises of strength and vengeance. Others vanish entirely, slipping away into the ruins, leaving only bloodstains and symbols smeared on the walls behind them. The priests preach harder, their sermons rising to fever pitch. They thunder about loyalty, about the Emperor's eternal protection, about the punishments of damnation. Yet their voices tremble. They see the signs, though they dare not name them. They smell the corruption seeping through the city, and they know their words fall upon ears that no longer hear the Emperor's name. Then come the omens. In the Manufactoria, machines begin to rebel. Servitors seize without warning, their flesh twitching, their augmetics grinding against one another as they scream in voices not their own. Assembly lines spew out twisted shapes of steel, half machine and half organic, before collapsing into ruin. In the sky, storms gather with unnatural speed, lightning carving symbols into the clouds visible even from orbit. Children are born with eyes too black, voices too deep, or limbs that bend in impossible ways. The Arbites double their patrols, the Guard conduct mass purges, but fear no longer subdues. It only feeds the infection. Every execution, every burning, every corpse dragged into the streets convinces more survivors that the Imperium is not salvation, but oppression. And in that void, other gods whisper louder. In the deepest levels of the Underhive, those whispers take form. Cults once fractured and hidden now gather openly in caverns lit by stolen promethium lamps. They chant in guttural unison, their voices weaving together like a single monstrous choir. Their leaders stand upon makeshift altars, robed in tattered banners of the rebellion, their bodies daubed with blood and ash. Some claim to hear the voices of angels, dark angels promising vengeance, offering power enough to tear the Imperium from the stars. And in those gatherings, something answers. Shadows move against the firelight, writhing as if alive. The air thickens, tasting of copper and rot. The faithful convulse, their bodies seizing as if their very veins ignite. Some rise changed, eyes glowing, voices deepened, strength unnatural coursing through their limbs. Others do not rise at all, their corpses offered to the growing altars of bone and steel. What was once despair has become devotion, and what was once devotion has become damnation. Above, the Imperium senses unease. Astropaths whisper of turbulence in the warp, their minds bleeding with visions of fire and teeth. Tech priests mark strange surges in their data slates, patterns that should not exist. Commissars execute those who speak of omens, branding them cowards or heretics. Yet no execution can silence the truth. Something is awakening in the ashes. The world is no longer merely broken. It is changing, reshaped by forces unseen. And the hammer that fell so mercilessly has, in its crushing, cracked the surface of reality itself. The final descent begins not with fire, but with silence. Where once Arbites' boots rang against stone, now the streets are empty. Patrols that march into the lower sectors vanish, their vox feeds consumed by a static that is not static at all, but whispers, syllables too low and layered to belong to any human throat. The survivors who remain above ground speak in hushed tones, claiming to hear voices in their sleep, calling them by name, promising them release. The ecclesiarchy's sermons grow shrill, their hymns cracking into desperate wails. Priests demand the people kneel longer, pray louder, fast harder. Yet their flocks dwindle each day. Altars once covered in candles are now smothered in ash. Where prayers to the Emperor falter, other symbols appear, drawn in blood across walls, carved into the flesh of the dead. The Arbites burn these marks as fast as they find them, but still they return, always more intricate, always closer to perfection, as though a hand greater than mortal guides them. In the Manufactoria, entire sectors lie silent. Girders sag under their own weight, oil pools black and stagnant across rusted floors. Yet some claim to hear the machines whisper, their gears turning though power has long since failed, their metal groaning like voices calling through iron. Tech priests scour data slates, muttering binary prayers, but their calculations return only nonsense. Repeating strings of numerals that when spoken aloud resemble chants older than humanity itself. The Guard begins to falter. Veterans who stood firm through bombardment and starvation now falter at shadows. They fire into empty corridors, screaming of shapes with too many limbs, eyes watching from cracks in the walls. Commissars execute without hesitation, purging fear as treason. But for every man silenced, 10 more whisper their doubts in secret. The ranks remain orderly on parade, but in the dark, when laser guns are set aside, soldiers scratch forbidden runes into the dirt with trembling hands. Then the transformations begin. It starts with the children, infants born with blackened sclera, with teeth too sharp, with voices that sing in tones not their own. Some mothers smother them before the priests can see. Others cradle them with reverence, declaring them gifts, proof that the Emperor has sent angels to guide them. When the Arbites come for these children, mothers throw themselves into the flames willingly, screaming blessings to powers unnamed. Adults follow. Men and women vanish into the ruins only to return days later, their bodies scarred with symbols, their strength multiplied beyond human measure. They stride through gunfire as though it were rain, tearing apart guardsmen with hands alone. Yet their voices are not their own. They speak as many, as though 1,000 unseen throats speak through them. The Underhive is no longer a labyrinth of ruin. It is a temple. Halls drip with blood that does not clot. Walls pulse as though alive, and shadows crawl against the light. At the heart of it, cult leaders chant ceaselessly, their words weaving together like a net, drawing something vast and hungry closer with each syllable. Astropaths scream in their towers, blood streaming from their eyes as visions sear across the void. They see fire consuming the planet, but it is not the clean fire of imperial sanction. It is a fire of mouths and hands, a storm of teeth and claws, an ocean of flesh that births more flesh. They see the Emperor's face consumed by a shadow that wears it like a mask, grinning with stolen holiness. They die with their tongues burned black, their last words carried into silence. The Imperium reacts as it always does. Reinforcements are requested. Exterminatus is whispered in closed chambers. But even as the messages are sent, they are intercepted. Not by ships, not by men, but by the warp itself, swallowing pleas for aid before they can reach the stars. The world is cut off, its cries devoured, its fate sealed. And in that silence, the people of the Hive begin to sing. Not hymns to the Emperor, not chants of survival, but songs of something vast awakening beneath their feet. Songs of chains breaking, of fire spreading, of gods long forgotten stretching their wings. The hammer that once fell upon rebellion has forged not obedience, but damnation. And now the anvil upon which it struck begins to crack. The first true sign of the end is not heard, but felt. Deep beneath the Hive, where the ground itself once trembled under the weight of industry, the earth begins to shudder. It is subtle at first, a low, rhythmic thrum, like a heartbeat too vast to belong to anything mortal. Civilians press their ears to the walls and swear they hear it pulsing through the ferrocrete. Guardsmen on patrol halt mid-step, their lasguns rattling in trembling hands as dust sifts down from ceilings cracked by some unseen pressure. The Arbites respond with crackdowns. Squads march into the lower levels, vox grills blaring edicts of loyalty and punishment. They drag cultists into the open, stringing them from lampposts, setting fire to shrines, blasting apart walls smeared with bloodied icons. But the more they burn, the faster the corruption spreads. For every shrine reduced to rubble, 2 more appear in its place. For every cultist executed, 3 more rise to take their place, their eyes blazing with the zeal of the damned. The Guard launches purges. Entire sectors are sealed, their populations declared tainted. Basilisks roar, their shells turning hab blocks into rubble, burying thousands alive. Commissars proclaim the Emperor's will as they execute entire platoons suspected of wavering loyalty. And yet nothing slows the rising tide. The warp presses closer, bleeding through walls of reality, as though the very planet itself is becoming porous. Vox units scream with distortion, pict feeds twist into spirals of light, and orders arrive garbled, reshaped into commands no officer dared speak aloud. Then comes the night of screaming. It begins in the refugee pens, where hundreds wake at once, shrieking as though flayed alive. Their cries spread like wildfire until the entire Hive echoes with agony. No enemy is visible, no attack launched, yet people claw their own faces, tear at their throats, hurl themselves into flames. The Arbites fire indiscriminately, believing it rebellion. The Guard forms firing lines, mowing down the possessed. But the screaming does not end until dawn, and when it does, the silence is worse. Streets are choked with bodies, their eyes open wide, their mouths frozen in endless screams. And in that silence, the first great rift tears open. A manufacturum plaza collapses inward, stone and steel folding like paper, swallowed by a wound in reality. From it, things emerge, not entirely flesh, not entirely shadow, but something between. They walk on limbs that split and rejoin, faces that ripple with expressions never meant for mankind. Bolter fire tears holes in their bodies, but the holes simply close, flesh knitting into new shapes, mouths opening where wounds once were. Each scream they emit echoes inside the skull, bypassing the ears entirely. The cultists follow. Thousands of them pour into the streets, their bodies transformed by devotion and mutation alike. Some are giants, their muscles rippling with grotesque strength. Others are eyeless, led by whispers none else can hear. They carry crude weapons and relics of blasphemy, icons of chaos raised high. Their chants shake the air, forming a counterpoint to the priests' faltering hymns. The Imperium fights. The Guard forms kill zones, laser guns blazing, bayonets dripping red. Arbites storm choke points, their mauls crackling, their shields held firm. For every cultist that falls, 10 more take their place. For every demon banished by faith and fire, another claws through the veil. The Imperium bleeds, and the ground drinks deep. Above it all, the ecclesiarchy proclaims victory still. Priests stand atop crumbling balconies, their voices hoarse, declaring that this trial is but a crucible, that the Emperor watches and will purge the unclean. Yet even their sermons tremble with doubt, for when they close their eyes at night, they see visions, not of the Emperor's light, but of a dark throne rising from ash, upon which sits a figure crowned in horns. Rumors spread among the surviving soldiers. Some whisper that the planet is already lost. Others claim that the rebellion was never rebellion at all, but sacrifice, a grand ritual to call forth something from the warp. And in their hearts, many believe the most heretical thought of all, that the Emperor cannot hear them, that their prayers are falling into a void now filled by other, darker ears. The administratum calls for retreat. The Arbites refuse, declaring abandonment heresy. The Guard fractures, some regiments willing to die to the last man, others already deserting into the wastes. Commissars execute without pause, but even they cannot stem the tide of despair. And as the great rift widens, swallowing manufactoria and cathedrals alike, the planet itself seems to sigh, a long shuddering exhalation, as though relieved to finally give way. The hammer that fell upon rebellion has struck only echoes. The world is not imperial anymore. It does not belong to men, nor to law, nor to the Emperor upon his golden throne. It belongs to the whispers, and they are growing louder. The final days arrive with no dawn. The sun that once rose over the Hive never pierces the choking skies again. Instead, a sickly glow seeps from the rift above the manufactorum, painting the heavens in shades of bruised purple and molten red. Lightning claws across the clouds without thunder, striking spires and hab blocks until they collapse like rotten bone. The air itself tastes of copper and ash, and every breath carries the stench of rot. For the few civilians who remain, survival is no longer measured in meals or shelter, but in how long they can resist the whispers pressing against their skulls. The Guard fights on, but it is no longer war, it is ritual slaughter. Their lines break daily, entire regiments torn apart in the streets, yet still they regroup, driven by duty, fear, or blind habit. Veterans stand shoulder to shoulder with green conscripts, laser guns glowing white-hot from overuse. Commissars roar oaths into the din, executing deserters and zealots alike, their bolt pistols booming above the cacophony. Every street is a last stand, every barricade is a tomb. The Arbites fare no better. Their once imposing shock formations are now scattered squads, patrolling ruins like wolves on the edge of extinction. They still proclaim the Emperor's law, their vox grills booming across empty squares, but their words carry only to corpses and shadows. When cultists descend upon them, they die to the last man, their riot shields cracked, their mauls splintered, their laws drowned beneath chants of chaos. The ecclesiarchy does not retreat. In the heart of the Hive's great cathedral, priests and zealots gather around the altar, piling bodies high, setting them ablaze as offerings of purification. Their sermons grow wilder, their eyes glazed, their voices ragged. Some burn themselves alive atop the altar, declaring it the ultimate proof of faith. Others turn their hymns inward, calling not to the Emperor, but to the very powers they once condemned. The line between priest and heretic dissolves, blurred in smoke and fire. Above it all, the rift swells. What began as a wound in the manufactorum now yawns across the sky, devouring whole sectors, dragging towers upward into the void as if the world itself were being inverted. From within, spill legions of shapes, some familiar in their mockery, warriors clad in twisted armor, their eyes glowing with malevolent fire, others so vast and indescribable that minds snap at their sight. Their laughter echoes across vox channels, carried in binary, in hymns, in heartbeat rhythms. There is no defense against it. There is only drowning. The Imperium's last hope comes not from those still on the ground, but from orbit. The surviving fleet, crippled and bloodied by months of attrition, receives the unthinkable order, exterminatus. Vox orders are whispered with trembling voices, authorization sigils sealed in blood. Some captains hesitate, staring down at the world where their men still fight, where their own kin may still live. But hesitation is weakness, and weakness is heresy. Slowly, methodically, the fleet aligns. Torpedoes are loaded, cyclonic warheads armed, lance batteries charged to overload. On the surface, those who look skyward see the heavens ignite. The first detonations shatter the atmosphere, boiling oceans and splitting continents. Firestorms consume hives already broken, glassing entire regions in moments. The ground quakes with each impact, mountains collapsing into seas of molten rock. The rift shrieks as reality itself burns, its edges tearing wider in a final scream before collapsing under the fury unleashed. For a moment, the world is nothing but light. When it fades, there is silence. No hive, no manufactoria, no shrines remain. The planet is a blackened husk, its crust fractured, its surface a wasteland of ash and magma. The rift is gone, smothered under fire and void, but the cost is absolute. An entire world, purged in the Emperor's name, struck from the records as though it had never existed. Millions of voices silenced in an instant. Yet in the warp, silence does not mean absence. The whispers linger still, coiling through the void, laughing in echoes carried on currents no mortal ear can trace. The Imperium believes the threat ended, the record sealed. But those who were touched by the songs in their final hours do not vanish so easily. Their dreams will seed new worlds. Their chants will be remembered. Their blood offerings will bear fruit. The hammer of the Imperium fell hard, but on this world, it struck only embers. Embers that drift now into the void, waiting for the right winds to reignite. And somewhere, in the endless darkness between stars, the gods laugh. The ashes settle. The world is gone. Its name will be struck from the Imperial record, as if fire alone could erase the truth of what happened here. But you and I both know, nothing is ever truly erased in the galaxy of Warhammer 40,000. Whispers travel faster than ships, carried on the warp, seeding doubt, fear, and corruption in places the hammer has yet to fall. This is the fate of rebellion in the Imperium, not freedom, not victory, only silence or damnation. And still, the question lingers. How many more worlds are already teetering on the same edge? If you've walked with me through this descent, if you've felt the weight of ash, the dread of whispers, and the fire of the Emperor's wrath, then stand with this channel so the stories of the Grimdark never fade. Like the video, share it with your fellow lore seekers, and subscribe to hear the next shadow whispered from the void, because in Warhammer 40K, the stories never end. They only grow darker.